Can we start?
Yes.
Because speaking about the regiment having come to Ambala after being raised in Ahmednagar, the 66th Armored Regiment, and we were part of the 14 Independent Armored Brigade, which is one of our 5 Independent Armored Brigades. Very strong brigade, very independent, and very capable of doing a lot of things. So, Brigadier Randhava was commanding, and as I told you earlier, we were good friends. Now, Narinder, the Lieutenant Colonel Narinder Singh, he moved the regiment by train from Ahmednagar to Ambala, but then he was called to do a course of instruction at the infantry school Mao, senior officers course, which I had already done. So while the regiment was moving, I was at Mao doing my course. And so I did note that Narinder wanted to train the young second lieutenants. So all the train commanders, where all the tanks, etc., were brought, 45 tanks, 2-3 trains, including a train containing carriages for the officers and families and jawans and families, were managed by second lieutenants. They brought the train. And so anyway, the regiment arrived in good shape at Ambala. You know, when a tank train moves, it's quite a joke because there are a large number of tanks and there are flats. The tanks mount the train. Tanks just go up and down like that, and they're tied into position with steel cable. And then they go, when they want to get off, they have to get off at the engine shunts them onto a ramp. They can get off at the ramp. So we arrived in Ambala in good shape with the regiment. And Narinder had to go for his course, which I had already done. And I, meanwhile, came and became the officiating commanding officer, though I was actually the second in command. So I had the pleasure of being the officiating commanding officer during my stay, during the regiment's stay with the 14 Independent Armored Brigade. We stayed there for about 3 months. And for 2 months out of that 3 months, I was the officiating commanding officer. And I had this lot of men and jawans, which my wife and I paid a lot of attention to.
Right.
And we tried to get them into a very good tank team. So their background was the artillery. There were some of the good points of these troops were they were very hardy, very strong physically. You know, when you're in the gunners, you have to be strong physically. Every shell weighs about 50 tons, 50 kg, you know, you're going to lift it. So they are good at shell exercises and things like that. So we found them very strong. Some of them were very good runners and they were very good at drill. So we trained them well, and Brigadier Randhava, who knew me very well, he is one of the finest armored corps officers that I've met. His background is that he actually got commissioned into the Army Service Corps prior to partition. Now, the Army Service Corps school was in Kukul, which is near Ahmedabad in present-day Pakistan.
Right.
I've spoken of Kukul earlier because my father was posted in Ahmedabad when I was a bacha of 6 years of age. And Kukul is a very interesting place. I visited there quite often. And we had the Army Service Corps school over there where young people who joined the army, became second lieutenants in the Army Service Corps, they were given their training as to how to function as an Army Service Corps officer. The Army Service Corps, as you know, are responsible for all transport movement and all stores that will be brought forward from ordnance depots to fighting units.
Okay.
So they're very good at management of large convoys, whether they be train or whether they be by road or by air or whatever means, because that's their job. And they're excellent at calculating how these big convoys are made, how they move, etc., and the time that they have to take. So they were being trained over there. So he was commissioned as an Army Service Corps officer prior to partition, around about 1946. But after the partition took place, we had found that there was a shortage of officers in armored corps regiments. So many officers from the infantry and the Army Service Corps, Army Ordnance Corps were asked whether they would like to transfer to the armored corps, and he happened to be one of those who volunteered to transfer. And he joined the armored corps. He's a brilliant mind, very, very sharp-minded officer. And I knew him from Ahmednagar, and I knew that the type of training that he can do, very few people could do. So he told me that I'm going to become an inspector regiment. Now, every commander, whether he's a brigade commander or a div commander, has to do an annual inspection of the units under his command, where he puts the units through paces, tactical paces, tactical exercises, drills, inspection of all the tanks and all the armaments, rifles and personal arms, etc. His E&E people check every tank, and the shape, whether the regiment is in good shape. Even the barracks of the men are checked. Each man is checked. A period of 3 days. So I prepared the regiment for this annual inspection. That is my first experience. But since I had been in the armored brigade in Babina as a captain and had seen the brigade commanders doing annual inspections of various units, I was very alert as to what is to be done for the preparation. We did that. And I decided to impress the brigadier with especially physical training and drill, in which my men were very good. We encouraged them to do that. And sure enough, we did an excellent drill parade for him and excellent physical training parades. There's a lot of physical training in the military. There's a separate physical training for recruits, but there's a separate trained soldiers physical training, which is very hard. And all our squadrons were adept at that. So we showed him all this, and the regiment was absolutely shipshape. I got a very, very good result for him. In fact, he remarked that as a new raising, it was in fact the best regiment in his command. And there were 3 other tank regiments over there, and I was very happy to see that a new raising was able to achieve that position with Brigadier Al-Hawa. Now, Brigadier Al-Hawa, as I told you, was one of our top commanders, and we had an exercise, meanwhile, run by the corps headquarters of 14 Independent Armored Brigade, where my regiment was also employed. Meanwhile, Narendra had also joined from the corps. So he was commanding the regiment. I was second in command. And I found that there was a battalion. There were a lot of infantry battalions there also involved in the exercise. And the battalion that was attached to us was the 4th Command Battalion, which was my brother Somnath's battalion. So I contacted the commanding officer. I said, I'm the younger brother, and I received a great aplomb by that battalion because they said he's the brother of Paramveer Chakra. So we were on a good net. And I must tell you how these relationships function, because in the exercise, though we had a different task, 66 Armored Regiment during that exercise. This 4th Command was in a different part of the exercise as an infantry battalion, and they were being attacked by enemy tanks, etc. So the commanding officer sent me a message saying, look, we are being hounded by enemy tanks, can you help? And so I asked the commanding officer, that my commanding officer, Narendra Singh, permission to take 2 troops of tanks, the 6 tanks, to go to the aid of this battalion, though it was not in our task. So he said, why do you want to do that? I said, my elder brother's battalion. You have to help them. In war, no matter where you are and what you're doing, if this type of relationship exists, you're ready to go out of your way to help a friendly unit. Very important to have friendly units. That's why we encourage in the military that commanding officers should meet each other, become good friends, so that in war they can support each other. I took these 6 tanks, and Narendra was carrying on the rest of the regiment's task, whatever it was. And I arrived there, and the enemy, which was attacking 4th Command, we charged at them with our 6 tanks, and they all ran away from there. And so we felt quite happy that we had supported 4th Command. The lesson here is that even in battle, no matter what your task, if a colleague or a friend is in trouble, please go to his help. Anyway, talking of Randy, his name was, we used to call him Randy Randhawa, right? His name was Randy. He, after his command of 14 independent, I saw him talking to the corps commander and others about how the armored brigade should be employed. I was very impressed with his offensive attitude. Okay. People don't realize that the tanks used offensively, where you attack the enemy. It's a very powerful part of our army. And I learned a lot by just watching him as to how he was employing his brigade whenever he had to come to the support of the infantry units. He was earmarked to become a major general and to take over the 1st Armored Division, which is a very prized appointment because we had only one armored division in the country in those days. And he had gone to Delhi for a few days to meet his family. Coming back by car, his own private car, to Jalandhar, where the armored division was, to Ambala, to Jalandhar, where the armored division was posted. And he was coming on this car, driving himself. And one of the drunken thelawalas, these trucks, who were boozing away, came on the wrong side of the road and went and started and bashed into his car. So the brigadier was killed.
Oh no.
We lost a very fine officer, which I think he would have easily become an army commander if not the chief, because he was such a fine quality officer. That is the luck of the draw in the military, or in life for that matter. You don't know when your time is up. Anyway, after 3 or 4 months with the 14 Independent Armored Brigade, and getting very close relationships with some of my friends from the academy who were in the Deccan Horse, which is also there, and the other regiments there, we were moved to Jalandhar. And in Jalandhar, we were the only tank regiment in Jalandhar. The Jalandhar was the corps headquarters. It was the 11th Corps, and the corps commander was Lieutenant General Prem Bhagat, Victoria Cross, who was from my school. And when we arrived there, I was officiating commanding officer. We moved the regiment to Jalandhar, and we had to replace a regiment called the Sindh Horse. Now, our men had been trained to maintain their tanks very, very well. We had to send our tanks back to ordnance, move there without tanks to Jalandhar, and take over the tanks of Sindh Horse in Jalandhar. And we found those tanks were not in very good shape, and we had a lot of little quarrels. Because when a regiment is taking over the tanks, we check on all the deficiencies and so on and so forth. There's a lot of give and take. That regiment was commanded by Sindh Horse at that time by Lieutenant Colonel Minto Tiwari, who was related to, he was the younger brother. Sorry, wait a second.
No problem.
He was the younger brother of Martna Tiwari of the Signals, married to my sister. So because we were related in that way, we settled all these differences and parted as good friends. In Jalandhar, the corps commander was Victoria Cross, and we were a new regiment coming in over there. And I had very good relations with the corps commander, so we managed to get good accommodation. And the regiment was given very good barracks, very good accommodation for its men, and garages for our tanks, which we didn't have earlier. And it was on one side of Jalandhar, which is open spaces there, so that we could do a lot of training. Now, Narendra, meanwhile, got posted out after his 1.5 years. Now, about armored corps officers commanding only for 1.5 years. Infantry officers command for 2 years, 3 years. Armored corps officers were unfortunately very much in short supply. Sam Manekshaw was the chief. He taken over in 1969, and he gave orders that since armored corps officers are all sweating to do a command, that each armored corps CO would only do 1.5 years. and then we post it out so that the other chaps can get a chance. Now, I don't quite agree personally with this, because this means we are trying to do officer career planning with more accentuation, shall I say,
Okay.
than what is good for our troops. It happens today even with generals, because now today, for instance, divisional commanders take over divisions for hardly for 9 months, 12 months. It's not enough for them to really get to know their men and to train them the way they want.
Okay.
When I was later in my life became a div commander, I did nearly 2 years. But today it's hardly 11, 12 months, and you have to change because there's so much rush for getting your, what shall I say, experience in command, so that you can be selected for higher ranks if you're found fit. I don't quite agree with this because, really speaking, if you come to think of it, the training of the men is important, and just for the career planning of officers to move them around very fast means that the Jawans don't have a proper commander for a period of time when they can get to know him. And now he get to know them properly, because this relationship between men and younger officers and the commanding officer or the general officer commanding or brigade commander, more time is necessary. We've studied at the other armies. The other armies have different systems. But in Indian Army, this is how we very interesting. Anyway, I spent about more than 1 year and 6 months. I did about 1 year and 8 months with my regiment. I must tell you that the command of a regiment is the first time that you're totally responsible for about 600 or 700 men.
Okay.
And about 45 to 50 tanks with supporting soft vehicles, you know, the 3-ton trucks and other vehicles in your command. And you have about 600 or 700 men, and you have all these weapons and equipment. It's a very strong force. And you, for the first time, have got the capability, and you write annual confidential reports on all your officers. So whether, and all the Jawans, because anything that you write or the squadron commander writes about is meant the promotion of men. They have to pass promotion boards, of course, but your reports are important to get them promoted. So you have to get to know your men. And it's a very responsible command. I think between you and me, it's one of the best commands in the army to command a unit, because you are totally responsible for your men and how they function in battle or how they function in peacetime. You take orders from your superiors, but how you manage your unit is important. And the unit takes the shape according to its commanding officer. I don't know if you find that in the teaching business. I don't know. For instance, if you've got a school with a very good principal, you'll find it's a very good school.
Of course.
But if you've got a school with not such a good principal, it's not a very good school, because the teachers are going here this way, that way, not listening to the orders from the boss because they don't have much, what shall I say, respect. So it's very important as to who's the principal. Similarly, we say in the military that the style and capability of unit is based on who's the commanding officer.
Right.
So to live up to that reputation, there are a number of things. Not only the question of management of men and their training, and also management of families to which your wife should be helping you, but it's also to ensure that everything in the regiment is spick and span and the administration of the unit is correctly done according to the law. I'll give you 1 or 2 examples of my experience, because it's a new regiment and mostly our men were from the artillery, who have a slightly looser control because they could be posted around the officers, and JSOs get posted here and there. It's not so now because they've gone on to a unit system. So sometimes you have people position NCOs or JCOs in certain positions. A bit of nonsense take place, you know. For instance, if there's a quartermaster stores, you're supposed to have so many blankets and so many, they're all kept there for your men. And the question is to make a few extra on the quiet by showing certain items are not they're torn and they're difficult and they're disposed of. So you get new ones, whereas the ones are good enough. So you get extra. Now, whether you have extra or not, the fact is that if you have something extra in your store,
हाँ,
then it's up to the quartermaster, three striper, Dafada we call him, or the quartermaster himself, to use these extras to get his work done when audits and accounts and other people come to check out, to give a few extra blankets to somebody, you do something like that. But the problem here is that once you have something extra, whether they're bags of water or whether they're blankets or whether whatever they are, people tend to get a little corrupt on this,
हाँ,
use these. It happens all over the world. For instance, when I was a commanding officer, I am allowed to draw petrol on payment from my own regiment. And the regiment of tanks, in those days, we had two types of petrol. We had a higher grade petrol for tanks. I don't know if you understand the word octane. The octane shows the quality of the petrol. If it's a higher quality, it's a slightly different color, and the octane is higher. That means that the engine functions more efficiently, provided it's tuned to that. So in our tanks, we had to have what is known as an 80 octane petrol, whereas for trucks and jeeps and things like that, we had a thing called the 70 octane petrol, which is a slightly different color, but a lower jet. So I sent my car with my driver to the petrol tank with a demand for, let us say, 2 gallons. In those days, it was gallons, about 8 or 9 liters of petrol. I had a Fiat car. So I thought that the capacity is about 20 liters, but I should get about 10 liters. And the needle was coming near zero, the petrol needle. And I expected by the time I got my 3 gallons as I demanded, it would come to middle. So my man went there, he got the petrol filled up, and he came back in the evening. Rupi and I were going to go in the car and look up somebody, and we switched on the engine, and the needle was full, came to the full. So early next morning, on physical training parade, which was starting at 6 in the morning, I landed up there. I told the Risuda major to come with me, and we went straight to the petrol dump. I said, all right, whatever the petrol line here, you take the ledgers. The ledgers are ones that the audit and accounts also looks at. Whatever is here, recorded in the ledger as having been checked by the commanding officer. And we had about 800,000 liters extra of 80 octane and 70 octane, because the petrol insurer was saving it up. And when you save up petrol, then you can have all sorts of corruption, because some civil truck drivers want some petrol, you can give it to them at half the rate and all that, because you've got extra. The petrol insurer was surprised. He says, Colonel Saab, that you're recording all this. If tomorrow there's a shortage, will be caught. I said, no, this has to be exact. So whatever I've seen here is recorded as balance. And that balance was about 8,000 liters extra to what we were supposed to have. So they were brought on charge. And then we did a court of inquiry to check out why this extra petrol had been done, whether just 1 or 2 insurers were sacked, and 1 or 2 petrol johns were sorted out, punished. New ones put there, so they all realized you have to go by the rules of the game. I found something wrong in the quartermaster stores, and I said, I rang up the local audit officer. And local audit officer is a civilian organization who reports directly to the army. He's supposed to check every unit by turn and by surprise sometimes, to check the position of stores as per the ledgers, and if you find anything wrong, to report. So I rang him up. I said, I want a special checkup by unit. He said, but Colonel Saab, why do you want? I said, because I'm suspicious that my quartermaster stores are either short or plus, and I don't like that. So I wanted that. My previous commanding officer had not taken much attention to this aspect. So I did like this, and I said, please have a check. So he warned me. He said, look, if I find something wrong, then the report will have to go to the army commander. I said, you can report to anyone, but I want to check. So he came, and they went to the fine tooth comb through our petrol accounts and our stores accounts, and they found a number of shortages, a number of surpluses, and all that sort of thing. And certain deficiencies. For instance, in the sale of petrol and other things, the deficiency of about 700 rupees. Now, the quartermaster Jesus, the moment he was told the deficiency, took 700 rupees out of his pocket and put it in the treasure chest as we got. So that was a temporary embezzlement of funds. So he said, I've got to report this to the army commander. Now, the army commander is a Rimtholian called General Kendall. He's a man who conquered Goa when he was a major general. And now he was the army commander. He's a gunner officer and from our ranks. He's a very fine officer. So he ordered a staff court of inquiry. That means he ordered my division, which is 15 Division in Amritsar, commanded by a Major General Harkesh Gaur, to have a special court of inquiry as to why 66 armored regiment has been found with surpluses and shortages and all that. But I didn't wait for that. I ran my own court of inquiry. In my court of inquiry, I found certain ratios and a quartermaster NCO, who's a very efficient man, by the way. Efficient people are dangerous because they are the ones who go. It can be more corrupt. I found these 3 or 4 people and I took action. 1 or 2 people, their reports were written so that they should not get any more promotion. 2 or 3 others were posted out of the regiment and sent back to the Armored Corps Center in school. You see? And I took action against them. I did. One of my squadron commanders did a person called Major Satpal Singh, who was very good at nitpicking about everything. So he did a very good court of inquiry. Told me exactly what was wrong and who did it. Result, we took that action. Having taken that action, I was told by the division headquarters was in Amritsar. So the AQ of the division rang me up. AQ is the staff officer to the Major General who's commanding. He's responsible for administration. He rang me up. He said, look, as per the army commander's instructions, we've ordered a court of inquiry of your regiment. So I'm organizing the court of inquiry. I said, I'm sorry, I've already done the court of inquiry and no other court of inquiry is accepted. He said, but you can't do that. The general is ordered. I said, well, tell the general. He said, no, but the general has been ordered by the army commander. Okay. I said, tell the army commander. I've done my duty as the CEO of the regiment and I've sorted out the people who have done so. What are you going to do? So then the general of the division called me. You please come to Amritsar and talk. Because I said, I don't accept anybody entering my unit. So staff and court of inquiry means that court of inquiry, lieutenant colonel rank and some majors and captains would be detailed from other units of the regiment to come to my regiment and do an inquiry. I said, I'm not accepting anybody to enter my regiment. I'm just showing you the power of a commanding officer. So the GOC called me and he said, what is this nonsense? Well, the army commander's ordered a court of inquiry of the regiment, you're not refusing to accept. I said, I've done my court of inquiry. And a lot of things have come out, and this is the action I've taken. He says, well, give us a copy of the court of inquiry. I said, that I won't, because there are a lot of other matters which are not pertaining to the division or to the stores, which I found out in the court of inquiry. And I've taken action accordingly, and I don't want you to know anything about it. So I'm managing the unit, and let me manage it. So he was a little disgusted with the uppity lieutenant colonel who was refusing the orders for a staff court of inquiry. And I said, you can tell the army commander. I'm not there. So I said, I asked for the local audit officer to come. He warned me that things would go wrong, and I found out things were wrong. I asked him to come because they knew things were wrong. And my intention is to sort it out. And I've sorted it out. You can't do anything more than that because I've already sorted it out. And the people who had to be punished have already punished. So once you punish a man, you can't punish him again. That's it, you see. So they referred back to the army commander. The army commander checked up with the LEO, the local audit officer. He said, yes, the colonel asked me to go there. On his request, we went and we found all this. He was not happy with his unit. And so we sorted it out. Now, what I'm trying to bring out here is a lesson that the commanding officer of the unit is the representative of the government of India. To command those 600 men in that unit and so many tanks, with the hope that he will ensure that everything is done correctly. Now, if the commanding officer wants to hide that because he doesn't want a bad impression about himself and his unit, then the government of India cannot ensure that everything is spick and span in a particular unit. So my point here is that a commanding officer has to be good enough to correct everything himself and take the rap for it if something goes wrong. See, I spoke of ambition last time. There's no question of ambition where you want to go in life. You got a job. Please do that 100%. If you can't do it 100% and not satisfied yourself, who else are you going to satisfy? Right? So that means you put your head on the block to make sure everything is correct. And as luck will have it, in due course, whatever the orders, everybody appreciates that. Because they know you put your head on the block.
Right.
You sorted something out and you're refusing any additional nonsense from anyone else. Then my annual inspection had to be held in the unit. You know, I'm one of those who feel, since I'd been through the 65 war on the staff of the army chief, I was absolutely certain that another war is coming up. And I trained my unit for war and for battle to such an extent that if you blew a whistle at 12 o'clock at night or 2 o'clock at night, every tank would get out of garages and go and position themselves in dispersed fashion. So if there's an air attack, they would not be caught napping. Load the tank, everything else. We trained that pretty carefully. These alarm systems in the unit. I mean, I could ring up a duty officer, somebody at about 2 o'clock at night, there's alarm. And, you know, within 10 minutes, the regiment had to be up and about and disperse everything, be ready for battle. So, and I had to visit them to make sure all this was done. Another point about training I want to show. You see, I told you about our great Red Eagle 4 Infantry Division, how they ran in 1962. The fact that DM Cole commanded that regiment and made them build houses instead of training in Ambala. And they came to grief when the Chinese attacked in 1962. Now, this training is so essential. People think that, well, it's a peacetime, what else are you doing? You're sitting idle. You're not sitting idle. Everyone has to train very hard. And there are training programs made which are carefully looked at by the higher commanders and they visit for training. Exercises at the unit level, at the brigade level, at the division level. Now, at the unit level itself, I did a training amongst my 3 squadrons, making them into 3, what do you call it, brigade groups, you know. 3 squadrons, each comprising 14 tanks and some soft vehicles that we call them trucks and things. I mean, every one of these had something to protect, whether it was a truck full of gold or whether it was a pretty woman that they were protecting or whatever, but they were let loose in a certain area from 3 different points. It was alley. I mean, anyone could attack anyone. But the idea was to attack the other squadron in such a way to take them by surprise and capture his goodies, which he was hiding in his B vehicles. We did that exercise. Lasted 3 weeks. And each squadron commander was fully trained to handle his 4 tank troops and his others and make sure that he not only defended the items that had to be defended by hiding them somewhere, but also took advantage of the tactical incorrectness of certain other units to attack them. And we had umpires, everyone, to say who won and who lost in a tank-v-tank engagement. And I can tell you that this experience held us in very good stead. Because when you train a major who's commanding 14 tanks, to be alley on his own, use his tanks in any way he pleases, he could go out of the line where everybody expects him to be and attack the enemy from various directions. A very good battle-winning factor. Okay. So these are some of the experience in command of the regiment. Then the men who are very good and the officers who are very good, you have to give them good reports and so on, so that you know those who are fit for promotion must be promoted and those who are not fit for promotion are not promoted. And have to pass the various examinations, so do officers. But your report is very important to see whether somebody is fit to go up in life or not, because you put somebody who is not fit, in your view, into a position of command in battle, there could be failures. The true significance of leadership, whether it's by Jawans or by NCOs or JCOs or officers, is when there's actual exercise or when there's actual battle. Sometimes when even a group of troops, no matter they're infantry or armored corps or whatever they are confronted with a very awkward situation, and the boss is not able to make up his mind as to what to be done. Sometimes a Jawan or an NCO takes over and says, come on, let's do it like this.
Right.
You have to check out that man and promote him out of turn, so that because he's got the quality of taking over when things go wrong. It's very important to know every man and how he's functioned in an exercise and how he's functioned in
Right.
that.
Right.
These experiences came when the command of this unit. So we all say that command of the unit is the first leg, where the commanding officer not only trains his unit, but himself is trained as to how best to handle a unit of the army, whether it's an infantry unit or an armored corps unit or an artillery unit, or for that matter, a supply unit or a electrical and mechanical engineering unit or an engineering unit or a medical unit. Because unless he shapes up as a commander, he must not go up in that. That's the experience of command of 66 Armored Regiment. And now, since we had to leave early, I managed to stay a few extra months because my relief, who was coming, was delayed. And I wanted to make sure that I handed over the regiment to him because the regiment had certain problems.
Right.
One example is that when Narendra, the previous commanding officer, was going, his last darbar, where he had to meet all the men and everybody was there was some agitation by some of the NCOs because they had not been promoted. They made a big noise. Of course, we noted who they were. And since I was going to take over the regiment, I sorted them out slowly as the months went by. The point here was that when the regiment was given its orders for raising, the idea was to mix everybody, Ahirs and Marathas, to mix them all. But since the commanding officer, the first commanding officer, was from a regiment where there were different class compositions, there's a big argument going on in the army even today. Should you have mixed classes, or each squadron or each company in the infantry is different class composition? For instance, under the British, you would have a Dogra squadron. You would have a separate squadron in the same regiment of Sikhs, and another separate squadron who could be of Jats. The idea of the British was that if the Jats or the Sikhs agitate against the British crown, then the other two people would be loyal and they would be controlling them. But in an independent country like ours, we don't expect this sort of thing to happen, and therefore the idea was to mix units. Our first commander-in-chief, that was General Cariappa, later Field Marshal Cariappa, he raised the Brigade of the Guards. And the Brigade of the Guards he raised, and he made sure. He raised two sets. One was the Parachute Brigade, and the other was the Brigade of the Guards. He made sure that these were from regiments which were very good, but the recruits would come from any class or composition. So that over a period of time, you won't have all Sikhs or all Dogras or all Jats or something mixture, because the replacement men would come from various other classes. Now, these are the arguments for mixed class units and special class units. So you will appreciate that this argument is still going on. Now, I come from a South Indian regiment, 16 Cavalry, where everybody is mixed. Up to in South India, there are different groups of people. The Karnataks of people are different, the Andhra are different, the Tamils are different, the